Hello, welcome back to Buckle Up. My name is Jasper and this is an Audi A6 Avant. And if I asked you, based on its exterior, how far you think it had been driven, what would you say? No, you're wrong. 236,000 miles, which is the distance to the moon when it's slightly closer during the shorter portions of its orbit. We'll start by talking about the front, and I'm down here on the ground to point out the Audi badge and also the fact that this has the Audi corporate face from the mid-noughties, which means that essentially, or allegedly, it looks exactly the same as every other Audi that was also produced at the same time. They had the same face, very similar lights, and well yeah, you certainly know it's an Audi, you just don't know which one. As we start to move around the side, you'll see the S-line badge on the front grille. Note the headlamp washers on the front quarter, and you'll see these 18-inch alloy wheels, which are simple but effective. I do quite like this era of alloy wheel from Audi. Now here you will see the sheer length of this bonnet, which does give you a clue as to the fact it's an A6. The A4 and A3s had subsequently shorter bonnets, but really down the side of this car there is very little to talk about. This does have some nice bright work surrounding the windows and some chrome coloured roof bars, as it is the Avant after all, but it's just quite a dull car. There's not much styling, it's just a long car. At the rear you can see the main event with the Avant, which is the boot. Again, not really much styling here, you've got tinted glass. However, the thing that I really do like is the squirter for the rear windscreen is integrated into the central spindle for the rear wiper, which is a very nerdy point, but I appreciate it. You can also see that the previous or a previous owner of this car has modded it by putting some quite opaque mesh over the rear lights because it looks cool, and you'll also note that this is a 2-litre TDI, and this engine was available in a couple of different outputs in this model, and the one in here is 138 brake horsepower, so super fast. You also have a tow bar, rear parking sensors, and some slight imperfections in the bodywork, but then again this car has done 236,000 miles, so I'm not expecting it to look perfect. Shall we have a look in the boot? Wow, it's massive. Joking aside, boot capacity from the floor to the window level is 565 litres, which is very good. It is a big boot back here. And if you fold the rear seats down, that will go all the way up to 1,660 litres, which is, again, very impressive. The floor is vaguely false, but there's not actually that much space underneath it. But the most exciting thing about the boot is it has rails on either side of it, which have got the cargo net tie downs in them, but they're adjustable. Wow, they can slide about and latch into place, and you could get accessories that you could clip into here, such as a dividing rod to separate out sections of your luggage. These are removable as well, so I'll probably not return all of them when I give the car back to its owner. If you fold the rear seats down, you get a continuous load floor from the floor of the boot all the way through to the top of the seat. They don't quite fold flat, but it's a pretty solid effort. Here in the back of the A6 there is a lot of space and a little bit of luxury. So you've got leather seats and an armrest. However, weirdly, for an executive saloon platform car, not a single place to put a drink in the rear of this. Nowhere. You won't get a water bottle in the door pockets, and there are no cup holders in this only somewhere which can store up to 0.5 of a kilogram of stuff. And I know that because they give you a maximum weight for it, so I guess don't lean too heavily on said armrest either. Now, there is a lot of width here, and everything is fine. The materials are quite good, and certainly in terms of actual rear passenger space, I've got plenty of knee room and a pretty decent amount of headroom as well, if my assistant could demonstrate. Thank you, yes. Marvellous. One other thing that I do really like about the rear of this car is you have climate vents in the B-pillars, so there is a little bit of comfort for those rear passengers. Now, in the door cards, you will see 2 speakers because this has the Bose surround sound system, as well as an ashtray for each of the outer passengers. Your cigarette lighter is located front and centre in the back of the centre console, as well as a couple of extra climate vents. So they got the important things in terms of cigarette lighters and ashtrays, but no cup holders. Up here in the front, you've got the same leather material on the seats, which are manually adjustable. However, in this car, they do have an electronically adjustable lumbar support on both the driver's and passenger's seats. And one other thing that is quite good is the fact that both the front seats are height adjustable as well. Audi didn't cheap out there. Now, in front of you, you've got 2 large gauges flanked with a digital screen in the middle, very small, low resolution LCD unit. And in this, you do have the Audi multimedia interface, which is actually better integrated into the dashboard than a lot of modern cars' infotainment systems are. You've got quite a lot of buttons in the center console, which are all nicely angled towards the driver, which is great apart from the fact that all of the passengers' HVAC controls are also angled towards the driver. Now, this is dual zone, and the knob on each side is actually used to adjust both the temperature, fan speed, air direction and heated seat controls through a push of a button around it to select what function you would like it to use. There's also auto climate control, a heated rear windscreen and obviously your max airflow for the front windscreen. The steering wheel is quite large, and the design in the centre of it actually mimics that of the corporate grille, and this model has also got the optional extra of cruise control, so you've got a little extra stalk at the side here to adjust that. The light controls are to the right hand side of the steering wheel, actually mounted quite high up on the dashboard, and you've got an electronic release for the glove box on the left hand side. The glove box is not particularly practical. It's got a slot for a pen and the 6 CD disc changer in it, but not a tremendous amount of space. You could basically get your owner's manual in there and not much else. And practicality isn't actually that good within this car. You've got a small cubby here, which is where the ashtray would be, as well as a single cup holder under a cover between the seats, as well as your cigarette lighter. Seems to be a running theme in this car. And there is a second cup holder, but it's only accessible if you don't want to use the armrest. So not overly useful, to be honest. The armrest does have a storage cubby in the top of it, which is felt lined. And you do have door pockets, but you aren't getting a bottle of water in those either, similar to the ones in the back. This has got auto headlamps, heated wing mirrors that are electrically adjustable, and some nice bits of silvery plastic dotted around the interior. Now, the Audi multimedia interface is quite good. There's a sat-nav system built in, as well as your radio, CD, TV even, as well as some information and setup functions for the car. So you can control a few things through this little screen here, and it's quite an intuitive user experience. However, to scroll down, you actually turn the knob counterclockwise, which is a little bit unintuitive to me. Let's see what I make of the drive. To start the car, you put the key in the slot to the left-hand side of the steering wheel. Putting it in actually turns the ignition on, and then it's a click round to your running position and further round to start the car, and you can hear that lovely 2-litre diesel engine purr away. Feel the diesel. one thing that I find incredibly bizarre about this, before I've even set off, is the electronic handbrake doesn't automatically release as you start trying to drive off. You have to select the switch to make it release, which is bizarre, I find. Now, this car has done 236 and 99 miles at time of me driving it. So I'm about to take it over the 236-100 mark, which is a not insubstantial amount of distance. Now, this does not actually drive as if it's done that kind of mileage, and that's partly because it's got good service history and had work done to it in the past when things have needed replacing. So obviously it does speak volumes about, you know, if you want the car to last a while, just look after it. But this 2-litre diesel engine is one of VAG's better units in terms of long-term reliability. Not quite 1.9 PD levels, but certainly if you look after it, this engine will be absolutely fine. Just service it when it should be done, don't push it, cam belt when necessary. Just look after your car and it will generally look after you. Now, what's a 138 brake horsepower diesel engine like in a car as long and boaty as the A6? It suits it quite well. You know, not gonna lie, I do wish there was potentially just a little bit more power. That would be beneficial. However, it's not horrendous. Now, one thing I will say is this gearbox generally is okay. The throw is not too imprecise. There is a bit of play in gear, but certainly second has no synchromesh anymore. So with a double D clutch, it's just about passable, but you do have to be careful with the changes into second. Going up isn't as bad, because if you time it right coming out of first, you can just about slot it in. However, coming back down into second is a little bit more difficult and requires some rev matching. I've not quite got my eye in with that, as I've only had the car for about an hour at this point and I've not driven it too much. Certainly dynamically, it's nothing to write home about, but then again, most Audis aren't. And a big reason for that is the way that Audi do their mount their engines is basically all the way out in front of the front axle. So part of the reason why Audis generally have long bonnets is they put the engine right the way out there, then bring a transfer box off the back of it to allow you to split that out to the drive shafts. So this engine is longitudinally mounted, however the vehicle is front wheel drive, which is a bit of a bizarre choice, but what it does mean is that for a quattro setup, it's very easy to take another shaft out the back of that transfer case and send it back to the rear differential. It just means that from an engineering standpoint, you've got a lot of mass right the way out of the front axle, so there is a bit of a tendency for Audis to understeer. Not that you are going to be pushing a car like this on particularly rapidly, because at the end of the day, 138 brake horsepower is not a tremendous amount. It is absolutely enough to get this moving, and certainly this kind of car will just eat miles. Sitting at the national speed limit on this B road that's quite straight, there is very little road noise, tyre noise, wind noise, very little noise of any kind. Under acceleration, obviously the diesel engine's clatter can be heard, but when you're just pootling along, it's very, very refined. Audi certainly do know how to make a car that will just crunch miles away and plod on. This era of VAG really will go the distance if it's looked after. Now, the car does feel long and big, and that's because it is. The length of this vehicle is quite a large factor, and you do notice that if you want to try and make a tight turn or do any kind of maneuver in it. It is more difficult because it's so long. Now obviously that's the kind of thing you'd get used to if you were driving this car and bought one, but it's certainly a kind of notable characteristic of the driving experience. The length does help it. It does feel very settled and planted, so you do have a benefit when it comes to driving experience as a result of the car's size. Now, in terms of comfort, I am remarkably comfortable here. These seats are very plush and the leather is quite good. They're nice and supportive, and the lumbar support definitely helps with that. And the driving position is excellent. I love the height adjustability in both of the front seats, and the actual position I'm in, I've got plenty of adjustment in terms of steering wheel, seat and position. The mirrors are excellent, so my visibility all round is actually really good. And with it being an estate, you know that the back of the car is the back of the car, so when you look through your rear view mirror and can see the rear wiper, you know that you've only got maybe that much car behind you, so it does make it quite easy to place. And to be honest, 138 brake horsepower is enough. Certainly able to get the car up to speed and sit there perfectly happily. This kind of car will just eat motorway miles. Twisty roads, you do find yourself wanting a little bit more pull and also a little bit more dynamically. This is not a sporty chassis, it's not a sporty driving experience, but it is a competent one. It handles its size and weight relatively well, although I think the suspension could do with being a little bit firmer. But then again, 236,104 miles now, so this car has absolutely been quite a long way. So the 2-litre TDI engine with regular servicing is absolutely fine. Power output of 140 PS or 138 brake horsepower, and a torque of 320 Newton meters, which is pretty decent. BMWs of the time had ever so slightly more torque and a little bit more power from the same capacity, but part of the reason why the Audi engines last so long is the fact that they aren't particularly stressed. In terms of driving refinement, this is pretty excellent, to be honest. It's certainly very comfortable, and you do get a just general feeling of capability for just driving. It doesn't instill particular confidence in terms of handling or dynamic ability, but that's not what it's for. These kind of cars were tremendously popular with taxi drivers or long distance commuters or sales reps who had to drive up and down the country year in, year out. This kind of car would absolutely do that job perfectly well. Comfortable, good view, efficient, and capable of just lasting. Now, all of the controls have aged pretty well. The steering wheel feels good. The steering itself also feels quite good. There's not a great amount of feedback, but it's not too assisted, and it certainly is, fine at pointing you where you want to go. It's just a sensible car. It does everything you need it to, whilst also being a little bit luxurious inside, but it's not doing anything incredibly well, is how I'd say it. Well, the A6 Avant is a car. If you are after a large estate and you need an Audi badge, yeah, buy one. If not, maybe think about the Volvo V70, because that looks better, drives better, and will also do the kind of astronomical mileage that this will do. Don't get me wrong, it's a perfectly good car, and that's it. There's no redeeming feature and there's no dispelling feature. It does exactly what you need it to, nothing more, and nothing less. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do that. You can either become a member here on YouTube or give some thanks. We have a Patreon. We also have a lovely merch store where you can buy some shirts or things with our logo or other graphics on them. And all of our social medias are linked down below in the description. Please check out some of our other content. We have reviewed a few other Audis. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Bye!